Hey, good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this what we consider to be an extremely unfortunate but important webinar for the restaurant industry. We're going to record this webinar, and we will be sending the webinar along with the slide deck out to participants within the next day or so. Just to give you fair warning that we are recording the webinar. If you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you move your mouse, you'll see a Q&A box. It's third from the right. So don't post your questions in the chat. Please post them in the Q&A box, and that we'll do the Q&A at the end. So my name is Richard Alexander. I'm Executive Vice President for Government Relations and Public Affairs with Restaurants Canada. I'll get Daniel to introduce himself.
Hi, Daniel Hirschkorn, immigration specialist, regulated Canadian immigration consultant with, I guess, a focus in foreign worker recruitment and LMIAs.
Okay. Diana?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am Diana Palmerin Velasco. I am the Senior Director of Future of Work at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and responsible for, the files on immigration and talent and skills and workforce development. Thank you.
Restaurants Canada is very pleased to have both Daniel and Diana here today to help us with this. I've seen both of them present on this issue before. And they did such a great job that we had to welcome them back. So anyway, but great to have Danielle and Diana here. Diana is with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and they are partners in this work that we do. A lot of the advocacy issues that we drive forward as Restaurants Canada, we do in partnership with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So they're a very trusted ally. I'll just kick this off by saying what we are seeing, unfortunately, in the immigration field related specifically to the restaurant industry is we're talking about a generational shift, a generational change in the supply of labor in our industry, and it's quite concerning. So we're going to touch on a little bit of what's going on in the public and politically, and then the changes. And then I'll tell you what we've been doing as an advocacy organization to try and hold on to what we have. And we'll also provide some potential solutions moving forward. So we'll jump right into it. So I'll turn it over to Diana.
Thank you so much, Richard. I will just take 10 minutes to kind of try to provide a little bit of context. We have seen a dramatic shift, I would say, in the discourse around immigration in the past 3 years. 2022, the federal government announces the most ambitious, really, immigration targets. Then we move to 2023, and we already see a change. The government saying there's a need to maintain the levels and stabilize. And then this year, 2024, we see a clear intent to decrease, permanent levels, but also temporary immigration. Just to kind of understand where things started, perhaps going not so well, I want to take you back to 2022. I am sure many of you are familiar. There were many sectors experiencing real labor shortages. In the second quarter of 2022, StatsCan reported we had 1 million unfilled job vacancies. The labor challenges were real across the country, and something that the federal government did to try to address this issue was, they launched the Temporary Foreign Worker Program Workforce Solutions Roadmap. This implied a series of changes, kind of relaxing a little bit the requirements of the program. Some examples of these measures were suddenly there was no limit to the number of low-wage positions, for example, in seasonal industries. The validity extension of LMIAs, or labor market impact assessments, workforce cap increases for, I think there were 7 sectors that demonstrated really urgent labor shortages. The federal government also ended the automatic refusal for low-wage occupations in accommodation and food services and retail. So this is 2022. Again, we're experiencing lots of labor challenges. Then this was a year that they launched the most ambitious immigration levels. Then we go to 2023. In August of 2023, the Minister of Employment announced the Recognized Employer Pilot Program as a way to kind of like cut the red tape and reduce the administrative burden on, employers that were compliant with the program and were hiring foreign workers. But then just a month after that, on September, we had the United Nations Special Rapporteur releasing his preliminary reports and linking the temporary foreign worker program, in his words, to contemporary forms of slavery. So, of course, lots of, criticism. And since then, we started seeing, kind of like a very unbalanced and negative narrative around the temporary foreign worker program. In addition to this, we saw a significant increase in the number of temporary residents in the country. At some point, 2.4, 2.7. Right now, we're talking about 3 million people. When we talk about temporary residents, these are mainly international students, people on temporary work permits. Only a fraction of those, not even 10% of those, actually came under the temporary foreign worker program. Other people with temporary work permits are here under other programs like the International Mobility Program, but also asylum seekers are part of that temporary resident population. And we have seen a consistent, significant increase. And then, of course, the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, healthcare and other social services struggling. So, we started seeing this amplification of this questioning and criticism of these, immigration levels, not only temporary residents, but of course, permanent residents. So 2024, again, earlier this year, you can see here on this slide some examples of, some of the headlines that have been dominating this space, and of course being very, very negative, and particularly focusing on temporary residents, international students, foreign workers. They are being blamed for all kinds of things. They are not here, but some other examples, this idea of employers being addicted to cheap foreign labor, as the politicians have been calling it, while youth unemployment reach, highest levels. Also, this idea that temporary immigration is driving down wages. We have seen stories of, jobs for sale, scams, a black market for LMIAs. So there's lots and lots of negativity that have really, I think, caused, like this dramatic shift that we have seen in the past 3 years. So I just want to go quickly to the next slide and talk a little bit about the public opinion. I think this is very, very important. We have seen that, what you see here on this slide, this is from an Environics Institute poll that was conducted in October. So it's very, very recent. We see that, almost 6 in 10 Canadians think there are too many immigrants in the country. When we look at the politics of it, 80% of conservative voters think there are too many immigrants. 45% of liberals voters think there are too many immigrants, and even 36% of NDP voters think there are too many immigrants. This is unseen. We know Canada has been really accepting of immigration, and this public acceptance is changing, and it's changing rapidly. Why? People are concerned about the effects that immigration can have on housing, on the economy, on this idea of, being overpopulated, some communities really struggling to absorb the numbers. But another very important component is a perception that the immigration system is out of control. And so there has been a loss of public trust in the immigration system. However, Canadians, the vast majority, do recognize the massive benefits that immigration has for the country and for the economy. They do particularly recognize those individuals that, come and contribute specialized skills, people that are highly educated, and people that do intend to settle permanently in the country. The public support is less when we're talking about temporary workers and international students. Next slide, please. And then when it comes to temporary foreign workers, this is, a poll that was conducted in September. Again, most Canadians, very high percentage think that the temporary foreign worker program is bad for housing. It has a negative impact on the job market. Most people agree that the changes that we have seen recently, and Daniel will go through each of those, were needed. And for a long time, there has been this idea that, and actually the Canadian Chamber has advocated for, a pathway for citizenship for temporary workers. But 52% of Canadians disagree with this idea. This impression that temporary means temporary seems to be prevalent. So I will pass it to Richard, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, this is this is the second time I've seen that presentation, Diana, and it shocks me how quickly the pendulum has swung against immigration in our country. It's incredible. We went from the highest levels in Canada's history to some of the lowest levels within like a couple of years. Absolutely incredible. One of the things that Restaurants Canada, we've been working on this and lobbying extremely hard at the federal level and trying to get the provinces on board and things like that. And one of the things that we've pushed around the temporary foreign workers is that it only represents 3% of the restaurant industry's labor force. It's an extremely small percentage, and the majority of those, 2/3 of those, are cooks and supervisors. And we all know the challenges around those two positions. So we made that argument, and I'll tell you what happened as I move along. So what did we do right from the start? We went public and we started pushing back on some of the negative connotations around immigration and taking Canadian jobs, et cetera, all the stuff that you've heard a million times. So with all our media, we had well over 367 editorial mentions. We haven't added them up since we stopped counting there some time ago. But quite a bit of media on it right across the country. Our VPs did a great job getting out there and defending the restaurant industry and trying. The goal was to try and hang on to what we had. If you folks remember back in, I think it's 2014, the restaurant industry was actually banned from the temporary foreign worker program. So that was hanging over our heads, and we were deeply, deeply concerned about that. So we were trying to play ball with government as much as we can and hang on to what we had. To do that, we had 14 meetings with key cabinet ministers and MPs, particularly MPs in rural and remote, with rural remote ridings, because they were the ones that were going to be significantly impacted by this. We had 2 meetings with the Prime Minister's office and raised this and pushed this extremely, extremely hard. What we received in every one of those single meetings was a hard no. They're a government that's low in the polls. They see the public opinion polling, and they were not willing to go back once the decisions were made. A lot of the decisions were made in the PMO, and former Minister Boissonneau's office was kind of blindsided after the decision. It was purely a political decision, had very little to do, if anything, with the economics around this. We do believe that there is an opportunity for exemptions around the recognized employer program and for temporary foreign workers, and maybe for areas that are rural, remote, or tourist areas. And the argument that we've been making is, look, if you look at the labor markets in these areas, it is clear that there is nobody there to fill these needed positions, and it's the communities want these services. So, and these services are needed by the community. So hard no on that. We also lobbied the provinces very hard on the postgraduate work permit for international students. So the international students make up a good proportion of our temporary workforce in the restaurant industry. And we've been working with the colleges across Canada. But in our meeting with Minister Mark Miller, he said to us that he's not opposed to carving out the hospitality streams in colleges, but in order to do that, he would need the provinces to lobby the feds to do that. So our team of vice presidents, we lobbied all the provincial labor departments, immigration departments, tourism departments very aggressively. The challenge that we encountered was the same as what the federal government is seeing. So the provincial politicians are aware of public sentiment around this. And we had a couple of small successes in terms of provinces that were willing to lobby, specifically in Atlantic Canada. And we've had a number of elections going on. So some other provinces are trying to keep their heads down on that. So we're continuing to do that. The other thing that we did, we've had for some time is something called an international worker toolkit. So I will drop it in the chat for folks to be able to take a look at. But what the international worker toolkit, we put a lot of work into that. And what it does is it provides alternatives to some of the programs. It describes all the different programs and gives recommendations on which ones are good for the restaurant industry. So we've been educating members about specifically 3 programs. So there's the Francophone Mobility Program. There is the Free Trade Agreement with Colombia for cooks and chefs. And we also have a Canadian-Peru Free Trade Agreement for cooks and chefs. All 3 of those programs provide 2-year closed work permits, and there's no requirement for an LMIA. So we've been recommending that operators be proactive and look at these streams before the current LMIAs and TFWs and things run out. So next slide, please. The other thing that we've been doing is we've been focused on the future solutions. So currently we have a number of proposals that we're hoping to see in the fall economic statement coming out. It was supposed to be December 2nd, but it's not looking like that now. There's a bit of a filibuster going on in Ottawa. So, but we have the first one is a youth career marketing campaign. So it's a campaign that would be funded through government to be able to target youth, target counselors, target parents to talk about the wonderful opportunities in the hospitality industry. And there's some money put there we've asked for some funding to be able to run that right across Canada for 3 years. And that should help with youth attraction to our industry. The second one is a much bigger ask. It's called Ready to Work Hospitality. It is essentially it is enhanced settlement services for Canadian newcomers. And we've been trying in our property. Sorry, I got a Teams beep at me, and I thought it was somebody on this call. So anyway, it's an enhanced settlement services for newcomers. There are currently 1 million unemployed newcomers in Canada, and we've been trying to point that out publicly in all those hundreds of interviews that we've done to try and push government to do something on this. These types of programs have been run in the past, and they've had high success rates. So the idea behind it is it provides settlement services for the individual, provides on-the-job training for the newcomer, matching program matches them with those jobs, English language, French language training, all these things, and supports for the employer. And as I said in the past, this has been very good in previous iterations that this has been running. It's a $40 million ask, and we are extremely hopeful that that's going to happen. We were getting really, really good messages right up until the point that Boissonneau resigned from his department. So next and last slide. So what we've realized as an industry, as Restaurants Canada and our advocacy, is that This is, we are being sucked down by a vortex or a whirlpool of anti-immigration sentiment, and the target has been on the restaurant industry. We have become the poster child for immigration, temporary foreign workers, you name it, even though it's only 3% of our workforce. So we need to take a longer view at a workforce strategy, and that's what we're intending to do. So we have to let this wave of anti-immigration and anti-foreign worker sentiment in the public, we have to allow this to crash. It has to crest, it has to crash. We're probably going to see a change in government. And if you think back to Diana's slide there, 80% of conservative voters believe that there's too much immigration in the country. So we are up against something, and we have a big challenge ahead of us. And so we're going to play the long game on this. So we're putting together a research plan first and foremost. We're going to get an independent third party to do a workforce needs and potential solutions, a study, if you will, by somebody like Deloitte or something like that, to put forward a plan with potential solutions. We're going to conduct significant public opinion polling. We're going to do focus groups in communities to get an idea of where are the opportunities publicly that we can start pushing on. And then we're going to do a targeted communication and community outreach strategy and plan and drive that forward. And the idea is to lay the groundwork so that we can create a secure and stable, predictable labor supply moving forward after we get this anti-immigration sentiment after it dies down. But that is going to take it's going to be a long-term play. So we're looking at, we could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years even. Looking at that. So, and Restaurants Canada, we're going to put in some of our members, we're going to put significant resources into this. So you can expect to see something coming within the next several months. Anyway, I wish I had better news, but we do know that there are alternative solutions and alternative streams that we can use to get us past this next, in 12 to 18 months, we project that we're gonna see the LMIAs start to run out and a significant strain on our labor supply in this industry. So with that good news, I will turn it over to Daniel to go through his slides, and we'll do some Q&A at the end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I guess I'm the conveyor of all the negativity here. The first couple of slides, I'll just go over very briefly. I'm sure everyone is aware of this already. There is a permanent resident reduction in numbers, and you have to know the numbers actually reduce year after year for the next 3 years. So 2025 and then 2026 is even lower, and 2027 is even a bit lower. I think the biggest impact this will have on the members here of Restaurant Canada is through the provincial nominee programs. A 50% reduction is a significant hit. Of course, you have to factor in that the largest provincial nominee program in Canada, which would be Ontario, doesn't have more than about 16,000 spots per year anyhow. Collectively, it's a big hit. And it's going to be difficult, but I think the other programs there's other ways around this. So the temporary resident cap, that's black and white. There are a lot of temporary residents in Canada. Most are international students. Many of those are on postgrad work permits, and many of those are looking for a pathway to permanent residency. Which leads to the last part, transition, emphasis on converting temporary residents into permanent residents. Interestingly, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the intent of international students and foreign workers was not permanent residency, but I would say that at least 12 years ago, that changed, and most students and foreign workers coming in every stream are actually coming hoping to achieve permanent residency, which is why being aware of what programs are out there becomes more and more important. Next slide, please. So here it says the 20-hour weekly cap international students, that has actually changed, I think just a couple weeks ago. Any international student can work 24 hours a week. It's not 40, but it's better than 20. The 10% workforce cap, there are exemptions to that, but the exemptions don't include any members here, so I won't go over what they are. The international student intake, that's a pain we'll feel later on. It won't have an immediate impact on the labor availability in Canada. Restrictions on spousal open work permits. Again, that's a complicated matter, but what it means is we will see quite a few less spouses of international students. So there will be a smaller pool of open work permit holders available to work in your industry. I think that will be a significant reduction, so it's something to be scared of. And the increase in temporary foreign worker high wage stream threshold. I'll spend 30 seconds on this. There's misinformation on what that means. Previously, if your LMIA application was at or above the median wage of the province, it would fall under the high wage rules. Employment Skills Development Canada released an announcement talking about 20%. Ignore that, it doesn't matter. We can send you the link. There's a link to every province in Canada with a wage. If the LMIA you're wanting to go after is on or above that wage, it is assessed under high wage. If it falls below that wage, it falls under the low wage rules. Those wages happen to have been determined by the previous provincial median wage times 20%. So ignore the 20%, go to the link, figure out if it's a high wage or low wage. Okay, next slide. And I did all the talking before this slide. So right there, the wage threshold, that's exactly what I just went over. I won't go over it again. The attestation, employers would use an attestation from a lawyer or a chartered accountant to get around having to submit tax documents. That's gone. And interestingly, any application submitted before October 28th, some are being requested for other documentation, even though they were submitted before that deadline. So if you are applying and you're hoping to use the attestation from your accountant, that will not work. You can expect to have to get a hold of some of your tax documents, the T100 and T125. There's a list on Service Canada website. I won't go over it. That's not a significant change because it was always discretionary anyhow. Next slide. So here are the changes. This is the big one. The refusal to process for any area of 6% or higher. There is a website which Service Canada has provided. You search by postal code. Here's the challenge. This will go by the postal code of the address of your location, of your restaurant. The challenge with these unemployment rates is that smaller centers and remote locations are bundled in to unemployment rates that may skew the reality. You might have a town located 100 kilometers from any major center. The major center has a 6.5% unemployment rate, but your town has a 3% unemployment rate. This is where the challenge starts. However, currently, find the website, put in your postal code. If your unemployment rate says 6% or higher, you shouldn't be applying for an LMIA, with some exceptions, which I will talk about later, because there's a glimmer of hope above and beyond what Richard has talked about. It's part 3, reduction of the proportion of low-wage positions to 10%, down from 20%. There are exemptions two industries. It doesn't affect anyone in your industry, so I won't list what those exemptions are. But anyone who's used the program knows that 20% was almost impossible already. 10% is going to be just completely ridiculous. That's currently what we're stuck with. And the maximum employment duration for a low-wage position from 2 years to 1 year, that's a tough one. 2 years allowed the foreign worker often to find an immigration stream. Again, a lot of these foreign workers, regardless of skill level, are coming to Canada with the plan and expectation of permanent residency. With this reduction in the validity of the work authorization from an LMIA to 1 year, it may mean you'll be getting the LMIA, the work permit will show up, and the worker will show up, and in 6 months, you'll be starting the LMIA process all over again to keep that same worker there. We'll see how that turns out. Next slide. So as mentioned, the 24-hour weekly cap is in effect right now. I won't go over the study permit stuff. Everything, you can find the numbers. This doesn't have an immediate impact. You know what's happening. The changes to the spousal work permits, limiting work permit eligibility to spouses of master's degree students to those whose program is at least 16 months. Again, these changes and the eligibility of the spouses to have open work permits, you won't feel these changes right away, but you'll feel them as colleges start their new intakes. Some in January, but I suspect we'll feel more in the summer and the September intake to know the effect that this will have. Okay, next slide. Post-grad work permit changes. Again, this is not immediate impact on your industry. The idea is that the eligibility to obtain a post-grad work permit was a little bit difficult, and then it got easier and easier and easier. And now it's getting more and more and more difficult to the point where unless you're in specific field of study, you may be studying in Canada and turning around and going home when your degree is done. I expect this is one of the changes that are rolled back once we get over this pendulum swing of public sentiment, but we'll see. Next slide. No, okay. I did want to mention one thing. With the 6% unemployment rate, and this is something to keep in mind. If you read Service Canada, the new rules from Service Canada, it states that Service Canada may refuse to process an LMIA from a location of 6% or greater unemployment rate. The term may is a legal term, and it means that they may or they may not. And hold that glimmer of hope. And I'll share a quick anecdote where I just submitted an LMIA for an employer in a very small town in the middle of nowhere. And by middle of nowhere, I mean the next major center was 100 kilometers away. Small town, next major center, 100 kilometers away. I put the application in with a map and an economic overview of the town, how many residents, what the industry is, and a letter. And I said, there are no people available to take this job. Service Canada accepted the LMIA for processing. So it's a small glimmer of hope. I think if you are in a major center and you think this is going to help, I think you'd be foolish to even try. In fact, I would encourage you not to abuse this knowledge. I would encourage only those of you in small centers, you cannot find people, your unemployment rate is lower than your region is posted, you're in a remote location. This is a valuable insight to keep in mind, and I will leave it at that because I think Richard would maybe want to talk more about that.
Yeah, no, that is part of our lobby on this. We went to MPs with communities that were exactly like that. And these are communities that have a long history of utilizing foreign workers to help keep services going, both within the restaurant industry and other industries as well. Our argument was this is going to cause chaos in some of these areas. Not only people not being able to get their cup of coffee, but all the other impacts that this is going to have on community services. So yeah, I guess that's why Boissonneau had said that I think they just sort of wanted things to die down a bit. So in Q1 next year, we're going to take another run at this, another hard run at it, and hopefully we can get some common sense to prevail. Yeah. Okay. So on that note, I was going to ask you, Daniel, if so, what would you, as an immigration consultant, what would you recommend restaurateurs do in terms of, like I mentioned a couple of programs, but what would be your strategy for overall of dealing with these changes?
Yeah, that's the key question here. I think for the immediate labor market needs and setting yourself up for longer term success once this changes, because we all know it will change, we just don't know when. Look at the underrepresented groups, but if we want to focus, if you anticipate needing the foreign worker program, you've exhausted all measures, set yourself up for success now. So when the changes are relaxed, you're already set up. Contact your local settlement services agency. Specifically, come up with a formal arrangement in place that they will be referring on an ongoing basis any eligible people to work. The other thing is focus on refugee claimants.
Yeah.
That's a required demographic in an LMIA application now. It's not, most people don't do it properly. They put a job ad up on refugeeslooking4work.com, and that's not a real website that I know of. But do a concerted effort, do a genuine position. You'll win on two fronts. Number one, you'll be surprised at how many highly capable, highly hardworking refugee claimants you'll find. The second thing is, once the LMIA restrictions loosen a bit, you don't have to recreate those relationships. You can expect to be providing proof of those relationships and strategies with your upcoming LMIA application. Service Canada will back away from some of this. They are not going to make it easier. The last go around, we've had several iterations of this. When Jason Kenney announced these devastating changes, we got over that, but LMIA's got more difficult. They're getting more difficult every year. So if you're seeking out some of these other groups, formalize arrangements, keep good records, expect that the application process becomes more difficult moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you talked about refugees. So that's one of the key target groups for the program that we've been advocating for, the Ready to Work hospitality. So it will be, I know, speaking with restaurateurs on a regular basis, one of the challenges that they have is with the refugees would be or making the transition into the workplace is the language. So this Ready to Work program really helps remove that barrier through English and French language training on the job. I know that might sound difficult for some people, but what they've found in previous iterations of this program is that by doing on the job, you're focusing on language skills that are directly relevant to the employment situation first, and that helps with the retention of these individuals. So we're really hopeful for that. Excellent, Daniel. Thank you for that. And Daniel is going to be on the hot seat again for the next 20 minutes here now. So let's play a little game. Let's see if we can stump Daniel on an immigration question. Sorry, Daniel.
No, it's probably going to happen.
Okay. I'm going to try and summarize, because there's a lot of similar questions coming in. Let's see. I think you've already answered this, but it keeps coming up, so I'll get you to answer it again. So the question is, what about the temporary foreign workers that are here now and have been working towards their PR? What will happen to them?
Well, you know, there will be a few 100,000 foreign nationals over the next 12 months who will have to make some hard decisions on their own. Man, one thing I can tell is try to make sure your staff are getting honest answers to genuine questions. The reason why you hear stories about LMIAs being sold, job offers being sold, is because there's so much desperation out there. And unfortunately, there's enough crooked people who are willing to take advantage of that. Talk to your staff, explore your options. One thing which I neglected to mention is you can still apply for and obtain an LMIA if the sole purpose of the LMIA is to support your foreign worker with a permanent residence application through the Express Entry program. Now, people might celebrate that until you find out that most people applying under Express Entry in the restaurant sector, being cooks and supervisors, are likely already low points in the Express Entry pool. So the 50 points they would get with an LMIA may not be sufficient. So by all means, explore those options. But I really think the best thing you can do for the sake of your worker is to be very honest about what their options are. If they don't have options, it is a tough one, but you might want to say, look, you might want to make plans to go home. You've been a good worker, we'll bring you back. Things will change, we'll bring you back. And I'm hoping enough foreign nationals don't throw their money at desperate measures. I hope enough people save their money, go home, stay in touch with their employer, keep working back home. When things loosen up, they apply to come back. There's no magic bullet. Everyone here is familiar with the provincial nominee programs. I'm so happy Richard mentioned the Canada Free Trade Agreement with Peru. There's the North American Free Trade Agreement. There are numerous free trades agreements. You just have to look for them. The Francophone Mobility Program is a very much underutilized program. With a Francophone program, it's an easier pathway to permanent residency because there's a focus on French across Canada. So maybe as a recruitment strategy moving forward, maybe prioritize the Francophone program. But it's tough. There's no magic bullet here.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. I'll just make a mention. I said I was going to drop our recruiting foreign worker toolkit into the chat. I have been informed by the powers that be, the people who are running this behind the scenes, that there is one more edit to it. This stuff has been changing very, very quickly. So there's one more edit to it. So we will send our toolkit out to all attendees with that email, with the recording and all that stuff. So you'll get that pretty soon. Okay, I just had a question here, and I just lost it. There's questions are pouring in here. Let me see if I can try and make sure that I get to groups of questions. Let's see. Question from Chris. Is the Economic Mobility Pathways pilot a viable option if you are struggling to find staff?
I need more details on which specific path that's referring to.
Yeah, it's okay, Chris, if you want to just drop it in the chat there, which program you're referring to, I'll get Daniel to ask. So here's one about the international students work permit. So oh my God, this keeps changing on me. Sorry, guys. It keeps updating and flipping me to the end. Sorry, guys. Sorry. This is old. We're using old Zoom technology here. Struggling with it. Okay. So do I understand correctly that we saw a 10% reduction in international student intake, which was for September of 2024? That's the first part of the question.
Yeah, I can't speak to specific numbers. That sounds accurate.
Okay.
But I can't speak to specific numbers. I apologize. So
No,
I'm
no
already
worries. Yeah.
stumped.
Just looking for clarification. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is a good one. I get this. I used to get this all the time when I was in Atlantic Canada, Vice President Atlantic. This struggle that employers have to try and contact somebody about their program. What would you recommend, Daniel, in terms of specific contact phone number employer can reach out to if they have questions on an LMIA application or anything like that? What's the general advice you would give on that?
There's two-step answer for this. Number one, Service Canada has a contact number. It's an employer contact number. So you should be an employer if you contact, but if you're working for someone, you could sit with them. So they provide a call service, which is open 10 hours a day. They can answer general questions. I think what a lot of employers in Canada could use is someone they know and trust who has experience and the right licensing to provide advice for these sorts of questions. Someone like me, meaning someone licensed who has the education and the industry experience, because the biggest one of the biggest challenges I have in my office is fighting misinformation.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times people start with, oh, I read online that, or I was talking to someone who said that. I mean, well, who's someone? So there are a lot of people across Canada who make a living out of foreign workers, immigration services. Do your due diligence, talk to some people you know, do reference checks. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of people who do immigration work who are not very good at what they do. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who provide immigration work who don't have the best interests of the client in mind. They have the best interests of their pocketbook in mind. Call Service Canada directly. Second thing is find someone you trust to ask these questions. And if you're an employer, have someone on speed dial, pay someone $50 a month to put them on speed dial. If you have the time to sort through the dozen announcements every day, by all means, do it yourself. If not, talk to the experts and cut through all the confusion.
Excellent, thank you. Melissa asks, if the international student came here before these changes taking place, do these requirements apply to them, specifically the study fields?
My last reading of this, if they applied before November and they're already here, these changes, the postgrad work permit changes don't apply, but definitely the 24 hours per week do apply. Some are effective now, some are only effective if you applied after the fact.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So all those, and same thing with the LMIAs, they
Correct.
are grandfathered, if you will. They'll just, but once they expire, that's it. But I'm very interested in your may not process the LMIA. That's interesting.
Yeah, I hope people don't abuse that one.
Yeah. Here's another one from Chuck, I think. What is the best website to use to find available refugees looking for work? I think people were putting up your find a refugee to work in Canada.com in and not getting anything.
Well, I should have booked that.
Yeah.
I should have booked that domain name before I came on.
Before you did this, yeah.
The best thing to do is your local settlement agency.
Yeah.
Like every province every major city has one. I could list 5 or 6 across Canada, but the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, OCASI in Toronto, Newcomer Society, they are well connected. I would encourage everyone to contact them, set up a meeting, tell them what you need. Everyone is happy. That's what their job is. You'll get some good people. If you want people to speak a certain language, they can help. If you want certain backgrounds, they can help. The interesting thing about refugee claimants, refugee claimants come from all over the world for many different reasons. Some speak more fluent English than we do, some don't. Some have more education than we do, some don't. Everyone is different. You may find someone with 10 years of cooking experience that you're surprised, but they're there. I encourage you to reach out.
Okay, I've got some really specific ones here. I'm just trying to find something that will be of interest to the general. Yeah, so question here again, I think it's been answered. Is there no chance of having current workers being grandfathered in? If they're before the cutoff date, they will be grandfathered in. Here's one. When will the update on foreign worker spousal open work permit come out? What's going to happen to the spouse that's already here? Can they renew if their spouse gets renewed?
If someone's already here as the spouse of, was that about foreign worker or international
It
student?
doesn't specify.
Okay, so under the current regulations, a spouse of a skilled worker in Canada is eligible for an open work permit. There are notices with IRCC stating that will change. I haven't seen it happen yet. The idea was it will change later this year. I haven't seen that happen yet. Currently, the eligibility for the spouse of a foreign worker to obtain an open work permit is solely dependent on the National Occupation Code of the worker. So if it's the spouse of your cook, you get an open work permit. It's the spouse of your kitchen helper, they do not get an open work permit. We're told that will change. I suspect that was just an easy way for IRCC to cut down the numbers and make people happy. I hope that doesn't change, but we're told it will change.
Question here from Abraham. Could you please explain a little bit more about the Ontario provincial nominee program? We'd like to retain our cooks after the 2-year work permit ends.
OINP, yeah. The Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program is, last I checked, the largest program with about 16 or 17,000 spots per year. The problem with OINP is it's also by far the busiest, most high demand program across Canada. I can't back this up with hard numbers, but I'm guessing it probably has as many applicants as the rest of Canada combined. Because Southern Ontario, as everyone here may know, accounts for about 60% of all immigration to Canada. The Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, there's too much to talk about, except I can say that because it's so popular, it's in such high demand, it is extremely risky to expect to put in an application to the OINP and expect it to be drawn, processed, and approved. If I had cooks who were relying on that program, I would be seeking other options.
Yeah.
It's just such a busy program.
Yeah. I'll get a couple more in quickly here. We support current employees on work permit extensions with LMIA. However, we've heard that the 50 points that the LMIA gets them is also going to go away.
No, not as of today. The 50 points is still there, but the other thing is if you have an LMIA for the work permit and it's under the old rules, you got another 2 years, which should suffice to get through all these harsh changes. Because I expect in 12 to 18 months, new streams open up. But currently the 50 points is still there.
Yeah. So here's something. This came up. I've seen this 3 or 4 times now. What about the concept? And this is more, I guess, for Restaurants Canada with the lobby for, but a seasonal LMIA for the restaurant sector in tourist areas. What would you think of that, Daniel?
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think, Richard, I think this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, no, we've sort of we've asked for exemptions around
Mhm.
around these seasonal areas and rural remote
Yeah, they're not very
forest
open to
areas.
that though, are they?
No, not
Yeah.
at the moment. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
my gut is telling me, and I always get in trouble when I start trying to interpret what the politicians are thinking. But what I'm thinking is they recognize that these areas, you know, like areas of Banff, Alberta, if you want to an area like they don't want there's no labor market there to fill those jobs. They
Yeah.
need you know, they rely on you know, traveling students and things like that. So there needs to be something done there, I think. So they're probably just waiting until Q1, which is what we're told. So anyway, we'll keep pushing on that. Okay, let's do one more. Let's see. A lot of these have been answered, folks. I'm sorry. I've already been answered. Let's see here. Well, let me say this. When is somebody going to educate the general public of the truth, the reality? I like that one. I'll take that one to
Richard
close
will
it
take
out.
that one. Yeah.
I'll take that one to close it out. Yeah, it's I describe it. I describe what's happening with public opinion. Changing public opinion is exceedingly hard. It's I'm not being defeatist here, but you know, in previous campaigns that I've run, you know, small campaigns to educate and, you know, run ads and you know, the media just doesn't cut it. Once the ball is rolling in a certain direction and the public feels very strongly about something, it's exceedingly hard and exceedingly expensive to correct the direction or change direction. It's the same thing about, you know, it's the same sort of concept of a political party that's down the polls trying to get reelected. They've got to do something drastic, and it's really hard for an industry to do that. But that's why we've looked at our long-term workforce strategy for the industry, which will include a lot of these things. But as I said at the beginning, we just need to let this, you know, it's typical of election cycles. We get close to an election and immigration gets used as a political tool. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing here now. But we just need to let that wave crest crash onto the beach, and then we'll start paddling out. But anyway, we'll keep you informed as members of Restaurants Canada. So thank you to Danielle. Thank you for Diana, who's been sitting there patiently waiting for a question. Sorry, Diana. Danielle's the real star here today. But I wanted Diana to come because she did such great work that I've seen her do before on just all the public opinion and the media and all this stuff. So thank you so much, Diana. Thank you, Danielle. And thank all the participants for joining us here today. And you will be hearing from Restaurants Canada about this webinar very shortly. So watch your inbox, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Dan.
Bye-bye.